The mop made a soft swish against the shining marble floor, echoing faintly in the wide, empty lobby of the alien corporate tower. The human man bent low, tired arms moving in a steady rhythm as he pushed the water back and forth. His dark uniform clung to his back with sweat, though the building's air system kept the halls cool. Nobody looked at him as they passed. He was just a janitor, invisible among the tall alien executives with their glowing robes and jewelry that sparkled like stars. They walked past him, heads high, speaking in languages humans were not supposed to understand. To them, he was less than furniture, less than a shadow, only someone who existed to clean their footprints. He had grown used to it. The long nights, the smell of chemical soap, the sound of heavy boots and alien claws clicking across the floor. He never complained. He had a daughter at home, and every coin he earned went to keep food on their table and a roof above their heads. He told himself invisibility was a kind of safety. If no one noticed him, no one could hurt him. But deep inside, silence was heavy. Every time an alien sneered at him, every time someone dropped trash on the floor while he scrubbed, he felt the weight of it. He endured it because he had to. Because being silent kept his daughter safe. The elevator doors opened with a smooth hiss, breaking his rhythm. Two tall executives stepped out, their long coats swaying as they walked quickly down the hall. Their voices were sharp, hushed, urgent. The janitor's hand paused on the mop handle, ears pricking. They were speaking in a dialect humans should never know. A secret tongue of the council, guarded, spoken only among the highest leaders. But the words rolled through his mind like old memories. He had heard them before, long ago, when he was younger, when he had worked in places he never spoke about. His chest tightened. He shouldn't listen. He should lower his head and keep mopping. But he couldn't stop. The first executive hissed angrily, "The deal will collapse if he speaks. We cannot let the council know." The second replied coldly, "Then silence him. A dead partner cannot betray us." The janitor froze, his pulse hammering. Betrayal, murder, secrets, words that could topple powerful names. He felt the mop slipping in his sweaty hands. He should pretend he heard nothing. He should walk away, vanish into the shadows like always. But when the taller executive spat a curse in that rare tongue, something inside him cracked. The words had meaning to him, meaning so sharp and bitter that he could not stay silent. Without thinking, his mouth opened and his voice carried across the hall. "You are wrong," he said, in their own language. "He already knows too much." The mop clattered to the ground, water splashing across his boots. The two executives froze mid-step, their long ears twitched. Slowly, both turned their glowing eyes toward him. The janitor's heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst. For a moment, silence stretched like a knife's edge. The air seemed to grow heavy, thick with shock. Behind the executives, a small group of staff had stopped walking, staring wide-eyed at the human janitor who had just spoken words no human should even recognize. The taller executive narrowed his eyes, his face twisting in disbelief. "Say that again," he demanded, his voice sharp as a blade. The janitor swallowed hard. His legs trembled, but something in his chest refused to break. He lifted his head, meeting their gaze. "You plot murder," he said, the words rolling out smoothly, perfectly, in their private language. "And you speak too loudly." Gasps echoed through the hall. An assistant dropped her data pad. The sound rang against the marble like a warning bell. The smaller executive stepped closer, disbelief and anger mixing in his glowing eyes. "Impossible," he whispered. No human could know these words. The janitor stood frozen, hands clenched at his sides, sweat dripping from his brow. He had no weapon, no shield, no excuse. Only his voice. The very thing that had kept him silent for years had now betrayed him. His secret was open, bleeding across the hall for all to see. Behind him, the mop still lay on the floor, forgotten. A puddle of dirty water spread slowly across the marble, creeping like a shadow. The janitor's chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. Around him, more and more heads turned, whispers spreading like fire. "Did you hear?" one voice hissed. "He spoke the executive tongue," another gasped. "No human can do that," someone shouted. The whispers grew louder, a storm gathering. And in the middle of it all, the janitor stood under the harsh white lights, no longer invisible. He could see it in their eyes, fear, anger, suspicion. The safety of being ignored was gone forever. The taller executive stepped closer until his shadow fell across the human. His voice was low, dangerous. "Who taught you these words?" The janitor's lips trembled, but he did not answer. He knew the truth would damn him. He knew silence would too. The hall was too quiet now, every alien waiting for his reply. His chest ached as he forced the words out, his tone calm, though fear burned in his veins. I learned because I listened. I learned because no one saw me. You speak as if humans are deaf, as if we are less than shadows. But shadows hear everything. The hall erupted in louder gasps. The executives stiffened, their faces hard with fury. The janitor felt every eye locked on him. He bent to pick up his mop, hands shaking. But it was too late. The silence of his old life had shattered. For the first time, they saw him, not as a janitor, not as a shadow, but as something else entirely. The news traveled faster than light inside the tower. By the next morning, every corner whispered the same impossible thing, that the human janitor, the one who pushed his mop across floors no one cared to look at, had spoken in the secret tongue of the executives. No one believed it at first. Some thought it was a joke made by the guards. Others said it was a lie created by jealous workers. But as the day passed, the story grew sharper, carried in low voices through offices and corridors. He spoke like a native, one clerk said. No, better than a native, another whispered. Soon, wherever he walked, eyes followed him. When he entered a room to clean, silence spread like a shadow. Conversation stopped, and alien staff turned to watch him, their glowing eyes filled with suspicion, fear, or wonder. He kept his head down, gripping his mop tighter, trying to stay invisible as before. But invisibility was gone. His name was unknown, yet now every alien knew who he was, the human who had broken the barrier. Some of the younger staff giggled nervously when he passed. They said he must be a spy, trained by secret human forces. Others whispered he was blessed, chosen by some old alien spirit. To the janitor, all of it was dangerous. Any rumor could kill him. He had never wanted this. All he wanted was to finish his shifts, take his pay, and go home to his daughter. But now his every step echoed louder than it should. That evening, as he finished cleaning a long glass hallway, he felt a cold presence behind him. He turned slowly, and two alien security officers stood there, tall and armored, their faces hidden behind glowing visors. One of them tilted his head, speaking in a hard voice. "You will come with us. Now." The janitor's throat went dry. His fingers tightened around the mop handle. For a second, he thought of running. But where could he go? The tower had no escape for someone like him. With a small nod, he followed them. They led him through silent corridors, past doors marked with golden symbols, until they stopped outside a narrow chamber. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a dim room with only one table and a harsh white light above it. The janitor stepped inside. The door shut behind him, heavy and final. For a moment, he stood alone, the silence pressing against his ears. Then the door opened again. 3 more aliens entered, wearing the long, dark coats of investigators. Their eyes glowed faintly in the shadows as they circled him. One of them leaned close, voice dripping with suspicion. "We heard you speak words you should not know. Explain yourself." The janitor kept his gaze on the floor. His heart pounded in his chest. He wanted to say nothing. He wanted to vanish, to pretend it had never happened. But silence was no longer possible. His lips moved before he could stop them. And when the words came, they were not in human tongue. They were in the alien dialect, smooth, perfect, natural. The investigators froze. Their heads tilted, ears twitching. The sound of his voice in their language was too clear, too strong. It was not broken or clumsy. It was flawless, better than many of their own. One investigator slammed his fist against the table. "How?" he shouted. "Where did you learn this?" The janitor's voice shook, but he answered again in their tongue. "I listened. I cleaned your halls, your rooms, your meetings. You never saw me, but I was always there. And your words, they stayed." The 3 investigators exchanged sharp glances. One of them whispered something the janitor could barely hear. A single word: dangerous. The janitor's stomach dropped. His secret was no longer just a curiosity. To them, he was a threat. Something they did not understand. Something that broke their rules. He could see it in their eyes, the fear of the unknown. The tallest investigator stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You will not speak of this to anyone. Do you understand? If you value your life, if you value your child's life, you will remain silent." The janitor's chest tightened at the mention of his daughter. They knew. They always knew. His silence was no longer about himself. It was about her. He nodded slowly, his throat dry, but inside, anger burned. As they turned to leave, one of them gave him a final warning look. His glowing eyes lingered on the janitor like a blade. Then they were gone, the door shutting once more, leaving him in the dim light, alone with his racing heart. When he stepped out of the chamber later that night, the tower felt different. Every shadow seemed alive, every hallway seemed filled with eyes. Whispers followed him still, louder now, sharper. Some looked at him with awe, others with hate. But all of them saw him. The mop in his hand no longer made him invisible. It made him stand out, a man who carried a secret too dangerous to hide and too powerful to ignore. And as he walked down the long glass hall again, he noticed a figure in the distance, standing too still, watching him. A guard, or maybe an assassin. He could not tell. The message was clear, though. He was marked now. His life and his daughter's would never be the same. The chamber of the council was filled with blinding light, polished walls reflecting the glow of crystal lanterns that hung high above. At the center stood the janitor, small and out of place, his mop and bucket taken from him at the door. Around him, in a half circle, sat alien executives, dressed in shimmering robes that shimmered with silver threads. Their faces were cold, sharp, curious, and full of hidden danger. He felt the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing on him, studying him like a strange animal that had wandered into the palace of kings. One of the executives leaned forward, his long fingers tapping the arm of his chair. "So this is the human," he said in their common language, his voice smooth with scorn. "The floor scrubber who dares to speak words not meant for his kind." Laughter echoed from some of the others, their voices sharp and cruel. They called humans weak, uneducated, unworthy of higher knowledge. A few smirked, whispering to each other as if the janitor's presence was nothing but a ridiculous joke. The janitor stood silent, his eyes lowered, his hands clenched tight. Every muscle in his body wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. Guards lined the walls, weapons ready, glowing eyes watching for the slightest wrong move. He knew one mistake could cost him his life. Then, one of the older executives rose slowly from his seat. His robe trailed along the ground, his face lined with age, his eyes glowing with deep cunning. He stepped closer, speaking in a voice low and dangerous. "If you truly know our tongue, then prove it. Speak to me now." But the words that left his mouth were not of the common speech. They were words from a lost dialect, an ancient tongue whispered in forgotten temples. No human alive should have even heard it. The janitor's breath caught in his chest. For a moment, he almost broke. But then, like echoes returning from far away, the words surfaced in his mind. His lips moved, and he answered in the same dialect, the syllables rolling smooth and flawless, as if he had been born among their people. Gasps filled the chamber. Several executives shot to their feet, their eyes wide with shock. Even the older one froze, his long fingers tightening against the folds of his robe. Murmurs broke out in every corner of the hall. "Impossible," one hissed. "No human can know that tongue, not even most of us." Another growled, "He is a spy. He must be a thief of knowledge." The old executive's eyes narrowed. He took a step closer, studying the janitor's face as if searching for some hidden trick. Then he barked an order, and an aide hurried forward, carrying a sealed scroll wrapped in golden cloth. The air grew heavy as the scroll was placed on the table before the janitor. "Translate," the executive commanded. The janitor's hands trembled as he reached out, his fingers brushing the ancient surface. Strange symbols glowed faintly across the parchment, words that belonged to a time before even these powerful beings had risen to power. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. But as his eyes scanned the lines, meaning came to him like a flood. He opened his mouth, and the translation poured out, word by word, clear and sharp. The scroll spoke of secret trade deals, hidden betrayals, and promises exchanged in blood. It spoke of leaders who had sold their loyalty, of enemies hidden within the council itself, of plots that reached into the highest levels of power. His voice was steady, but inside, his heart raced faster with every word. He knew what he was exposing could end his life. The chamber erupted. Executives shouted over each other, some denying the words, others demanding proof, a few falling into uneasy silence as their eyes darted toward guilty faces. The janitor felt their fury like fire around him. He could see it clearly. Some wanted him silenced forever, while others wanted to use him, to drag him deeper into their world of secrets and lies. One executive slammed his fist against the table, roaring, "He lies! No human can read this." But another, trembling, whispered, "No, it is true. Those are words only the scroll could reveal." The janitor's chest tightened. He had gone too far. He had revealed things no one dared speak aloud, and now every powerful figure in that room had a reason to either protect him or destroy him. The older executive stepped forward again, his eyes glowing with something between awe and hate. "You are dangerous," he said softly. "More dangerous than you know." He leaned close, so only the janitor could hear. "And dangerous men do not live long in this tower." The janitor's blood ran cold. He lowered his head, his hands shaking, his mind racing to the only thought that mattered, his daughter. He had put her in danger without meaning to. He had opened a door that could never be closed again. The guards stepped forward, ready to take him away. Around him, the shouting of the council continued, voices rising in anger, fear, and plotting. Some wanted him destroyed immediately. Others demanded he be kept alive, used as a tool. None saw him as a man anymore. To them, he was something else, an object, a weapon, a threat. As the guards led him toward the door, the janitor could feel the eyes burning into his back. Whispers chased him like knives. He knew his life was no longer his own. He was caught in their world now, a pawn in a game of shadows and power. And deep in his heart, he feared that every step forward would only drag him further away from the quiet life he had fought to keep. The words he had spoken from the scroll still echoed in the grand chamber long after he was dragged out. Every powerful alien inside knew the truth could not be unseen. He had exposed their lies, their hidden deals, their betrayal of their own people. That moment marked him, and from then on, the tower no longer felt like the same place. When he returned to his cleaning duties, the air was different. Where before there had been laughter or the sound of busy workers, now there was silence when he passed. Every head turned. Some eyes narrowed with anger, others with suspicion, and a few with something worse, fear. He could almost hear the thoughts behind their stares. If he could read ancient words, what else could he uncover? If he could break secrets, who would he betray next? That night, while he scrubbed the floor of a quiet hallway, the stench of smoke reached his nose. His heart jumped. He rushed back to his storage closet, and there he found his cleaning supplies burned to ash. The mop he had used for years was nothing but a black stick, broken in half. On the wall above the ashes, something was carved with sharp claws. 3 words, deep and jagged. "Stay silent, human." He stared at the words, the heat of the ashes still rising into his face. His throat tightened. It wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. They were telling him that he had spoken too much, and the next time, it would not be his tools that burned. It would be him. Or worse, it would be his daughter. That thought hit him like a stone to the chest. He pressed his back against the wall, his breath shaking. The fear he carried was not for himself, but for her. She was the reason he had taken this job, the reason he worked long nights for little pay. She was the only piece of innocence left in his life. If they touched her, if they harmed even a hair on her head, he would never forgive himself. The sound of footsteps snapped him from his thoughts. He turned quickly and saw 2 alien workers staring at him from down the hall. They looked at the burned supplies, then at him, their glowing eyes wide with a mixture of fear and pity. They whispered to each other before hurrying away, leaving him alone again in the heavy silence. He knew what their whispers meant. The whole tower would know about this by morning. His danger was no longer hidden. Later, when he returned to his small apartment at the edge of the city, he tried to act normal. His daughter, small and bright-eyed, greeted him with a smile, running to hug him as soon as he walked in. Her laugh filled the tiny room, and for a moment, the darkness of the tower seemed far away. He held her close, breathing in the comfort of her warmth. But deep inside, his mind kept replaying the carved words on the wall. That night, as he tucked her into bed, she asked a question that chilled him. "Daddy, why do men follow us now?" His heart sank. He forced a calm smile. "What men?" She frowned. "The ones outside. I saw them when we came home from school. They stand across the street. They don't smile." He swallowed hard. His hands trembled as he pulled the blanket tighter around her. He wanted to lie, to tell her she imagined it, but he couldn't. Children often saw things adults wished to ignore. He kissed her forehead and whispered, "Don't worry. Daddy's here. but his chest burned with fear because he knew she was right. They were being watched. Sleep did not come easily. He sat by the window, the city lights flickering outside, and saw the faint outline of two figures across the street. Their shadows stretched long under the lamps. He stayed awake, gripping a broken piece of wood like a weapon, waiting for them to move. They never did. They only stood there, silent, like predators waiting for the right moment. The next day, when he walked back into the tower, he felt the weight of unseen eyes on him. Every shadow seemed to breathe. Every corner seemed to whisper threats. Even the guards at the doors gave him long looks, their hands hovering near their weapons as if they expected him to do something dangerous. He returned to his hallway duties, but the silence pressed harder than before. The words he had read from the scroll had been a spark, and now the fire of suspicion was spreading fast. He had uncovered corruption, and those who profited from it would not forgive him. He knew what they wanted. They wanted him to be silent forever. He gripped the mop handle tightly, though the new one felt strange in his hand. It was no longer just a tool of work. It was a weapon now, even if only in his imagination. He told himself again and again he had to be strong, not for himself, but for his daughter. They could threaten him, they could mark him, they could burn his tools. But if they touched her, he would fight with every breath in his body. For the first time, the janitor understood what kind of world he was standing in. It was not just about cleaning floors and staying invisible. It was about secrets, shadows, and power. And now, whether he wanted it or not, he was part of it. The words he had spoken could not be unsaid, and the enemies he had gained would not forget. As he left the building late that night, the cold air stung his face. He glanced behind him and saw them again, the same two dark figures watching from the street. One of them raised a hand and dragged a single finger across his throat in a slow motion, a silent message that made his blood run cold. He walked faster, his fists clenched, his mind racing. The war he never wanted had already begun. And deep down, he knew he would not be able to protect his daughter by staying silent anymore. The small apartment was quiet, but the silence did not bring peace. The janitor sat at the old wooden table, his hands rough and trembling as he tried to eat. His daughter sat across from him, her bright eyes studying him carefully. She was too young to understand politics, too young to know what danger lurked outside their door. But she was not blind. She saw the worry in his eyes, the way he checked the window every few minutes, the way his hand never strayed far from the heavy wrench he kept near him now. "Daddy," she asked softly, "why do you look so scared?" He forced a smile, but it cracked at the edges. "I'm not scared," he whispered. "I'm just tired." But she tilted her head, frowning. "You're lying." She always had a strange way of sensing the truth. He sighed and looked down at his plate, unable to answer. She didn't press him further, but she knew. Later that night, as he tucked her into bed, he noticed her notebook lying open beside her pillow. Strange symbols were scrawled across the pages, lines and curves that glowed faintly under the dim light of the lamp. His heart skipped a beat. He reached out and touched the paper. The runes were not random drawings. They were the same alien markings he had seen on the ancient scroll in the council chamber. "Where did you learn this?" he asked, his voice rough. The girl looked up at him with innocent eyes. "I don't know. They just come to me. I see them when I close my eyes. In my dreams." He sat heavily on the edge of her bed, his chest tight. The words carved into the wall of his cleaning closet returned to him. "Stay silent, human." He had thought the warning was for him, but now he understood. The danger was not only his. His daughter carried something even greater. If the aliens discovered that a child, a human child, could read and write their sacred languages, she would not be safe for even a single day. He tried to smile for her sake, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Don't show this to anyone," he said firmly. "Not even your teachers, not your friends. Promise me." "I promise, Daddy," she whispered, her small hand squeezing his. When she closed her eyes and drifted into sleep, he sat there for a long time, staring at the glowing symbols on the page. His fear deepened. He wasn't just protecting himself anymore. He was protecting something far bigger, something the aliens would kill for. The next morning, as he walked her to school, he noticed two men in dark suits standing by the corner. They pretended to be talking, but their glowing eyes followed his daughter as she skipped ahead. His hand twitched toward her shoulder, pulling her closer. He whispered into her ear, "Don't talk to strangers. Stay close to me." She nodded, but her small smile faded, sensing the danger too. After dropping her off, he lingered outside the school gate, watching. His heart beat fast when he saw one of the suited men move closer, as if to follow her inside. But the man stopped when he noticed the janitor's glare. Their eyes locked for a long moment before the man turned away. The message was clear. They were watching. That evening, as he prepared dinner, his daughter spoke again in her innocent way. "Daddy, the men at school were there again. They don't blink much." He dropped the spoon he was holding. The sound clattered across the floor. He rushed to her side, kneeling down, gripping her small shoulders. "Listen to me carefully. If anyone ever tries to talk to you or take you, you scream. You scream as loud as you can and run back to me. Do you understand?" Her eyes widened, but she nodded. She could see the fear in his face, and she knew it was serious. That night, after she had gone to bed, he sat alone by the window, staring out at the shadows moving in the street. His mind raced. The gift he had hidden for years was no longer his alone. It lived in his daughter now. If they took her, they could use her for anything, for power, for control, for war. He could not let that happen. But how could a single janitor fight against the strongest leaders in the tower? How could he protect his little girl when enemies circled them like wolves? His hands clenched around the wrench. For years, he had lived quietly, silently, believing that being invisible was enough. But invisibility had been torn away, and now he had to make a choice. The shadows outside shifted again. He saw them, the same two figures standing under the streetlight, watching his window. They did not hide anymore. They wanted him to know they were there. His blood ran cold, but his fear hardened into something sharper. He turned his head to look at his daughter sleeping peacefully in her bed. Her small chest rose and fell, her hand curled around the notebook filled with glowing runes. She had no idea how dangerous the world outside was. She only trusted him to keep her safe. He whispered into the night, more to himself than to anyone listening. "You will not take her from me. I don't care who you are." His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of iron. For the first time in years, he did not feel like just a janitor. He felt something deeper rising in him, something fierce. If they wanted to silence him, they would have to fight for it. And if they dared to touch his daughter, he would show them a side of humanity they had never seen. The wind rattled the window, carrying the faint hum of distant city lights. He tightened his grip on the wrench, his eyes never leaving the street. The men were still there waiting, but so was he. The summons came late at night. 2 guards in silver armor knocked on his door, their glowing eyes reflecting in the dark hallway. His daughter was asleep in the next room, and he placed a careful kiss on her forehead before stepping out. The guards said nothing as they escorted him back to the tower, their silence heavier than words. His heart pounded with every step. He knew this was no ordinary order. Something was coming. They led him through private halls he had never cleaned before, past walls lined with portraits of ancient alien leaders, their stone eyes glaring down. At last, they stopped in front of a chamber sealed by golden doors. One guard pressed his palm against the lock, and the doors slid open, revealing a room lit by blue fire. Inside, only one figure waited, a powerful executive whose name every worker in the tower whispered, but never dared say aloud. The executive's robe shimmered like liquid metal, his face long and sharp, his smile dangerous. He dismissed the guards with a flick of his hand. When the doors closed, silence filled the chamber. The janitor stood alone before one of the most feared beings in the tower. "Sit," the executive commanded, pointing to a chair across from him. The janitor obeyed, though his hands trembled as he placed them on his knees. The table between them was wide and made of black crystal, and upon it lay a single sheet of paper, a contract. The executive leaned forward, his eyes glowing brighter. "You are not an ordinary man. You speak our languages better than we do. You uncover secrets buried for centuries, and now the council fights among itself because of your tongue. You human are valuable." He tapped the contract. "Serve us, and we will give you everything. A life of wealth, safety for your child, power beyond your dreams. All you must do is obey." The janitor stared at the shimmering paper. The letters danced across the surface in alien script, but he could read them clearly. Promises of land, riches, a high position in the tower. His daughter's name was even written there, under the section that guaranteed her protection. His throat tightened. For a single moment, he imagined her living without fear, dressed in fine clothes, free from hunger and danger. He imagined himself not as a janitor, but as a man who could finally give her the life she deserved. But the memory of the carved words on his closet wall burned in his mind. Stay silent, human. He remembered the shadows following him, the men watching his daughter's school, the threat scratched into the air with a finger across a throat. Promises in this tower were chains, not gifts. He looked up at the executive, whose smile never reached his cold eyes. "And if I refuse?" the janitor asked, his voice quiet but steady. The executive's smile faded. For a long moment, he only stared, the glow in his eyes pulsing slowly. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and spoke in a tone soft as poison. "Then your safety ends. Your child's safety ends. And I will not protect you when the council decides you are more trouble than you are worth." The words hung heavy in the air. The janitor's pulse thundered in his ears, but he kept his face calm. He could feel sweat running down his spine, yet his voice did not shake when he answered. "I will not sign." For the first time, the executive's mask cracked. A flicker of rage passed over his face. The room grew colder, the blue flames flickering higher. He leaned close across the table, his voice low. "You are bold, human. Boldness is often the last step before death." The janitor rose slowly to his feet. His knees threatened to give way, but he forced himself to stand tall. "Maybe so," he said, still in their perfect tongue, "but death is better than chains." The words cut through the silence like a blade. The executive's hand twitched, as if tempted to strike him down right there. But instead, he waved dismissively, his cold smile returning. "Go then. Walk back into your shadows. But remember this, human. Shadows cannot hide you forever." The doors opened with a hiss, and the guards returned to escort him out. He walked between them, his heart hammering, his hands clenched at his sides. His legs shook, but inside his chest something fierce had awakened. He had faced one of the most powerful beings in the tower and had not bowed. Fear still burned in him, but beneath it, another fire burned brighter, defiance. As he left the chamber, whispers echoed from the halls above. He knew others had been listening, hidden in the shadows, ears pressed to the walls. They had heard him refuse. They had heard his defiance, and soon the whole tower would know. When he stepped out into the cold night air, the city lights spread before him. The guards vanished into the darkness, leaving him alone. He took a deep breath, the weight of what he had done pressing heavy on his shoulders. By refusing, he had not only endangered himself, he had challenged the entire order of power. But when he thought of his daughter, of the way her small hand gripped his whenever she was afraid, he knew he had chosen right. He could not bind her future with the lies of corrupt masters. He would rather fight every enemy in the tower than let her grow up as a prisoner dressed in gold. Above him, the stars blinked faintly through the city's haze. He clenched his fists, whispering to himself, "They think I am weak. They think I will break. But they don't know what a father will do for his child." And as he walked back through the dark streets, he realized he was no longer only protecting her. By refusing, by speaking out, he had lit a spark that others had seen. A spark that could grow into something the council feared more than anything, a human voice that would not be silenced. The council chamber was overflowing, every seat filled, every shadow packed with alien staff and guards. Rumors had spread all week, and now everyone came to see the human janitor who had shaken the tower. He walked through the giant doors with nothing in his hands but his mop, its wooden handle worn smooth from years of cleaning. The crowd whispered and laughed, expecting him to be humiliated, expecting him to crumble under their gaze. To them, he was only a poor worker who had wandered into a world far above him. But the janitor's steps were steady, his eyes sharp. He knew this moment was no longer just about him. The Grand Council sat high upon a raised platform, their robes glittering like rivers of jewels. One of them leaned forward with a cruel smile. "Speak, human," he said mockingly. "Let us hear your broken words. Amuse us before you are sent back to your bucket and rag." Laughter echoed across the chamber, sharp and cruel. The janitor stood in silence, gripping his mop tighter. His heart pounded, but he kept his gaze fixed on them. Then, in a voice steady and strong, he began to speak. At first, he spoke in the common alien tongue, every word smooth and perfect. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but he did not stop there. He switched suddenly into another dialect, older, harsher, long forgotten by most. Then another, and another. His words flowed like water, each language falling from his lips without hesitation, without error. By the time he spoke the fifth dialect, silence gripped the hall. By the 10th, some of the council members had risen to their feet in shock. And by the time he spoke in a language so ancient that even the eldest members could only half remember it, the entire hall was frozen, their jaws dropped, their eyes wide. The janitor's voice carried like thunder. He spoke not just words, but truths. He exposed the corruption he had uncovered in the scrolls, naming the secret deals, the hidden betrayals, the crimes committed in silence while the people suffered. His voice struck like fire, each phrase cutting through the thick air of lies. Every sentence echoed, bouncing from wall to wall, impossible to ignore. Some of the council shouted for him to stop, their faces red with rage. Others tried to cover their ears, as if the truth itself was poison. But many more in the crowd listened with wide eyes, their hearts pounding, realizing the power of what he revealed. One executive slammed his fist against the table. "Silence him! He is a fraud!" Guards stepped forward, their weapons drawn, but something unexpected happened. The janitor kept speaking, his voice louder than the chaos, and one of the guards froze. Then another. Slowly, one by one, the guards lowered their weapons. Their glowing eyes shifted, and then, in an act that shocked the entire chamber, several of them dropped to their knees, bowing their heads before the human janitor. The council erupted into panic. Some shouted for punishment. Others demanded his execution on the spot. But the sight of their own guards kneeling before a human spread fear deeper than any sword. The janitor's daughter, who had slipped into the chamber with the crowd, ran to him now, her small feet echoing across the polished floor. She grabbed his hand, her eyes glowing faintly with the same strange gift he carried. Gasps rippled through the room again. It was not only the father, it was the child too. The gift was alive in her, brighter and purer. The janitor pulled her close, standing taller than ever before. His voice thundered through the hall. "You call me weak, you call me dirt, but your own words, your ancient tongues, live in me. You tried to hide the truth, but shadows cannot hide forever. And now even your guards bow, not because I asked them to, but because they hear truth in my voice, truth you tried to bury." The hall shook with shouts, but the crowd beyond the council had changed. Workers, clerks, guards, all those who once whispered about him now raised their voices in agreement. Murmurs turned into chants, chants into roars. The janitor was no longer invisible. He was no longer just a man with a mop. He was the one who spoke what no one else dared, the one who stood against corruption with nothing but words. The council tried to regain control, their voices high with rage, but the sound was drowned out by the growing roar of the people. The janitor stood in the center, his daughter's small hand gripping his tightly, his mop leaning against his shoulder like a staff. The guards who had bowed remained on their knees, their faces calm, their loyalty now shifted. For the first time, the council realized something they had never considered before, that their greatest enemy was not an army, not a weapon, but a single human who refused to be silent. The janitor looked up at them one last time, his eyes burning. He did not shout. He did not beg. He simply spoke in a voice steady and clear. "You cannot erase me. You cannot erase us. We are here, and we are not afraid anymore." The chamber erupted again, but this time, the power no longer belonged to the council. It belonged to the man they had once ignored, the man who had mopped their floors. He walked out of the chamber with his daughter beside him, his head high, while the sound of voices rose behind him, voices no longer whispering, but shouting his name. And for the first time, the tower itself trembled, not from war or fire, but from the unstoppable force of truth spoken aloud.